All right, good evening, everyone. I hope that you can hear me and see me. Welcome to the Transportation Alternatives Forum with candidates who are running for City Council in District 7. So I'm Rachel Holliday Smith. I'm the Manhattan reporter for the nonprofit news website called The City. And if you don't know about us, we're relatively new. We are an independent newsroom that is reader supported and covers the 5 boroughs of New York. So I'll be your host tonight. And I also want to thank the sponsors of this event. Of course, our host is Transportation Alternatives, but we've also got support from Riders Alliance, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, Families for Safe Streets, and Streetopia Upper West Side. So wanted to make sure we shouted them out to begin. So we have just an hour and 6 candidates, and we've got a lot of transit related topics to get to. So we're just gonna dive right in. I'm gonna introduce the candidates and you guys can just wave as I say your names. And then after that, we'll do opening statements so you can just introduce yourselves to the folks who are watching. So in alphabetical order, we have Marti Allen-Cummings, an activist and drag artist. Dan Cohen is an affordable housing professional. Stacy Lynch is the current Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. Maria Ordonez is an organizer and she's a current college student at Columbia. Great to see a student in the race. Corey Ortega is an advocate who has worked with tenants and veterans and others. And lastly, we have Ray Sanchez, who most recently served as general counsel to Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. So let's start with opening statements from each of you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you're running. So loosely, this will be a minute, and then we're going to start in reverse alphabetical order just for fun. So Mr. Sanchez, you can begin and introduce yourselves.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. Native Manhattan. I grew up in NYCHA buildings, went to PS 110, and love Manhattan dearly. This is my native island, I like to say. Currently, I'm the CEO of a homeless service organization called Aguila Inc. And after 7 years of De Blasio, 4 years of Trump, and an ongoing pandemic, we just really need people who know how to make government work and work better for everyone. Transportation Alternatives is a great organization, and whether it's talking about City Bike, that's a city franchise that I was on the FCRC, right? Governor's Regional Economic Development Council, $10 million work for the South Bronx, passing a living wage law in 2012. I really want to take my experience in government and put it to work for the people of New York as we try to figure out what life after COVID looks like. And it's a real pleasure to be here. As someone who didn't get a driver's license till he was 23, going to Jersey for law school, the mission here is very dear to my heart. Walkable, breathable, and pedestrian streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Corey Ortega, you've got a minute.
Hey everyone. My name is Corey Ortega. I'm an organizer. I'm an advocate, and I have 12 years of experience in city and state government. I believe that we can audit several agencies like the NYPD and reuse funds for better forms of public safety, including truly affordable housing, automated enforcement mechanisms, infrastructure development, faster bus lanes, and safe and secure bike lanes. I believe that because police officer-based enforcement is less effective than infrastructure alternatives like street redesigns and automated enforcement that puts people of color at risk. By shifting resources to infrastructure solutions, which are 24/7 and are free of implicit bias, we are able to use what we learn from the police department, but reduce traffic injuries and fatalities and save money. So that's the pitch I'm making to all the voters in District 7.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go now to Maria Ordonez.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Ordonez. I'm a candidate for City Council for District 7. And I'm a lifelong resident of West Harlem, where I was born and raised, and I've organized in my community and all across the district for different issues like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, for tenants' rights. And I'm running now because it's time that working class New Yorkers have a seat at the table in City Hall, because for too long we've been ignored by our local, state, and federal government. And now is the time that we have representation and have a voice. And For me, it's really important that we give everyone an equal access to open streets, to transportation, to access to public transportation. And that's why it's really important that we center the voices of the community first. And to me, in the movement I'm building right now, it's been really important to block by block, talk to people, hear them out, and make sure that we're elevating their voices, because now it's time to bring their voices to City Hall, because for too long, they've been left out of the conversation and the decision-making table. So it's really important that we continue open streets. We try to reduce car culture, and we incentivize the use of public transportation. I do not have a driver's license. And I will not get a driver's license because I believe in making sure that public transportation is truly accessible for everyone, and making sure that people can actually access that. And at the same time, making sure we have safe streets, safe bike lanes, and people all across the city can access that, people of color, working class New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stacy Lynch.
Thanks, Rachel. And I'm an avid reader of the city. I get it every morning in my inbox and read it at like 8:30 in the morning. I love it. I'm happy to be here today, doing what I love most, talking to people about this district and how we become a better community, better neighbors. Most of you know me through my dad, Bill Lynch, the mastermind behind the election of David and Dinkins. Or when I worked in the mayor's office. Rachel, I'm a former deputy director of intergovernmental affairs and now a full-time candidate.
Apologies.
No worries, no worries. But I'm also a practicing attorney. But most importantly, I'm your neighbor. And like my dad, I believe in public service, community, and building coalitions to build smart solutions that have true impact. While working in city government for close to 10 years, I created such programs as the Race and Equity Task Force to address the inequities that were magnified during the pandemic, advocated for investing in schools like widely performing arts, created programs like Brothers, Sisters Thrive to address the stigma of mental health in our communities, created an all-girls basketball league called the Junior Liberty League in partnership with the New York Liberty, fought against the third-party transfer, and worked with advocates to address workers' rights and the use of e-bikes. And now I want to bring the same type of dedication to this community, a community that has done so much for me. And so I look forward to having a fruitful conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we'll hear from Dan Cohen.
Thank you. Good evening to you all, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm running for the City Council because I believe I have the most energy, experience, and ideas to help our community recover from this pandemic and grow anew. I'm the elected Democratic State Committeeman for the 69th Assembly District. I won overwhelmingly when I first ran in 2010, and I've been reelected 5 times since then. I'm also a founder of the Progressive Caucus, a voice of reform within the state party, and I'm proud to have received the endorsements of State Senator Robert Jackson and Assemblymember Daniel O'Donnell. I have incorporated, with attribution, the 2021 Transportation Equity Agenda put forward by Transportation Alternatives and others as a basis for my own plans for our city's transportation infrastructure. I'm a biker, a runner, a public transit user, and an outdoor urban enthusiast. And I'm on the board of one park organization, Friends of Morningside Park, and the founder of another, Friends of Annabella Vilas Playground. I'm a lifelong resident of Upper Manhattan, now 50 years. I grew up in the district, and now with my wife and our son Caleb, who turns 9 tomorrow, and also attends local public school. As a proud New York City public school graduate and a public school parent serving on the school PTA, I've seen firsthand the struggles that our schools face and why tackling them is so critical. For the last decade, I've worked in an affordable housing not-for-profits, and for the past 7 years with a nonprofit housing partnership. Like Stacy Lynch, I'm now a full-time candidate. Working in affordable housing, I see the urgency of the issue. As a member of Community Board 9, I've advocated for 1,000 new affordable units in the district on sites either owned or controlled by New York City, and I've refused to accept money from real estate developers so that my perspective is clear. Next year, virtually the entire city government is changing, and new leadership must hold the police accountable, advocate for structural change to foster racial equity and LGBTQ justice, and protect the most vulnerable among us. Ultimately, I believe that climate change is the biggest threat that we face as a city, a country, and a planet. I'm committed to making New York City the standard for responding to global warming. We cannot have climate justice without fundamental changes in the way that we operate. I'm grateful for your consideration, and I ask for your support. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, and lastly, Marti Allen-Cummings.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Marti Allen-Cummings. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm excited to join all of you and all of my fellow candidates. As you can see before we started, we're all in a groove with one another, which is great. But you know, I'm not a typical candidate, and I think that's what sets me out in a unique position to be the best suited for this role. You know, I moved to New York when I was 17 years old. I'm almost 34 now, and I moved here like so many people to pursue my dreams. You know, New York is the place of dreams, right? And I proudly worked as a drag artist in our small locally owned businesses. And while drag is not a typical path to running for office, it is, sorry, my dog is, Woodrow, stop. Running for, he's digging a hole in the couch. You know, drag is not a typical path to running for office, but it's one that's uniquely positioned me by teaching me about community building and community organizing. Drag is what took me to Occupy Wall Street 11 years ago. It's what taught me that getting involved block by block, being of service to your neighbors is how to get real actionable things done. So I joined the community board where I serve on the senior issues committee. I proudly serve on the board of directors for the Ali Forney Center for homeless LGBTQ youth, and I'm one of the founders of a mutual aid organization in our district that's doing food distribution, PPE and clothing distribution. Tomorrow we'll be giving out vaccines and free haircuts on 125th Street. So if you need a vaccine, come at 8 p.m. We have a bus ready to distribute. But I believe of being of service to our neighbors. And I'm a proud gig worker who knows what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck in a city increasingly built for the wealthy. So we need to have housing justice and police accountability and transportation and street equitability and justice, which is what you're fighting for. And I so proudly feel I align very strongly with the issues that you all are fighting for. And we need to make sure that we're integrating our schools and funding mental health care services, addiction services. I've been in recovery for over a decade now, so I know that firsthand. These are just a few of the issues we have to tackle. Environmental justice on the local level, but I'm excited to be in this race, to be the candidate with the most money raised, the most in-district contributions, and the most elected endorsements from progressive electeds. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to having this exciting conversation, and happy 9th birthday to Caleb tomorrow.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start with just a quick one before we get into some substantive questions. And I'll start with Corey Ortega on this one, and then I'll go in an order across my Brady Bunch grid here, which is, I just want to know what your favorite way to get around the district is. What is it? Walking, subway, bike, car, bus, something else? What's your favorite way?
Before the pandemic, it was just regular train and buses.
Okay.
After my wife and I, we were a bit concerned with public transportation, and we stopped taking it until we saw things get better.
Gotcha. Okay. Maria, can I ask you the same question? What's your favorite way to get around the district?
Yes. So around the district, walking. I can walk from the north to south of the district in like 2 hours, and I love, you know, just seeing the people and my neighbors and talking to them. But across the city, I like taking the one train. I love the one train.
Okay, great. Stacy, I'll go to you next, and then Dan.
So there are two ways that I love to travel the district, and probably outside the district as well. I have a big dog. His name is Bear. Marty, we need to set up a play date. Bear is 115 pounds, and he will take me to every dog run in the district. And so we walk north, south, east, west. And then the other option of transportation is my bike. I love my bike. I bought my bike during the pandemic. I forgot how fun it is to really ride a bike. And so that's my second form of transportation.
Okay. Dan?
Bus and subway, mostly bus, particularly because conveniently the bus stops in front of my building. So if I need to get somewhere uptown, it goes straight up Broadway. So the bus.
Nice. Marty, I'll go to you, and then we'll end with Ray.
I love my bike, and I feel like a lot of the candidates have seen me pedaling around with my pink helmet. I love my bike. But you know, one of the things we have to fight for, I live on 143rd Street, so it gets me to around the district pretty quickly. But, having protected bike lanes is so important, especially for our delivery workers who are out there late at night in the dark. We need to make sure that we're setting up our streets in a safe way for people who use bikes, and making sure that we're providing this way of transportation in a way that's going to keep people safe. But I'm an avid biker, and I'll probably go for a ride first thing tomorrow before calling voters.
Great. And Ray Sanchez.
I'm a big walker. Growing up in Manhattan, I've always been a big walker, right? Especially during the early part of the pandemic, before Fairway closed. Man, that broke my heart. I live right on 158th Street, so I go straight down 158th, right into the water, and I would walk that all the way down to 130th, go to Fairway, load up my book bag with groceries, and I'd walk back, and that was just a great way to start. Run my errands, reload my fridge, and it's always been a big walker.
Okay, great. So we're going to start with a question on open streets, and I'll go to Maria first on this one. I just want to hear how you've seen the Open Streets program work during the pandemic, what you thought of it, if you think that it should be expanded or scaled back or somewhere in between. And then if you do support it and you want to see it continued, how would you ensure that the people who are maintaining those open streets actually have the support they need to keep it going? So I know that's a multi-part question, but you see where I'm going. So go ahead, Maria.
I'll start by saying I think that Open Street was good, and I think it should be expanded. And when I say that I think that it should be expanded, when looking at the scope of District 7, for example, it should be expanded north to south. So we need equitability across Washington Heights, West Harlem, and the Upper West Side. So not just open streets in Upper West Side, but open streets all across the district. And how I think we can do that is by making sure we're supporting small businesses. We need to make sure that they have the resources they need to continue to stay open, and the resources they need to even, be part of the Open Streets program, and, the infrastructure they need to build outside and everything, and provide, free grants or reduced grants, and making sure they can do that. I know that was an issue in Upper Manhattan, where you don't have that extra money to build and have the seating outside, so you just stay indoors and you lose money and you go out of business. So making sure that we support minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and making sure that we support legislation in the city council, like commercial rent stabilization, the Small Business Job Survival Act, and making sure that these can stay open, and making sure it's equitable all across the city and the district.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll remind everyone that this is going to be a minute for each response, because we're chomping through time already, so we're going to have to pick it up. But I'll go to Stacy Lynch next, then Dan Cohen, Marty, Ray, and lastly, Corey, just so you have the order. Okay, so Stacy Lynch, go ahead.
I'll be short and sweet because I know I'm long-winded. I love open streets. I think we should expand the program. I echo some of what Maria said. I think we need to pull in small business to figure out additional loans and grants to support them, and as well as creating an alliance similar to what Central Harlem has. I think District 7 should form an alliance to support small businesses, restaurant owners that have Open Streets program.
Okay.
I love open streets, and I would want it to be expanded. I agree with Maria that it shouldn't be just on the Upper West Side. Part of the reason why it exists most prominently on the West Side is there's already an infrastructure in place. There's a business improvement district, and there's a couple of strong block associations, and there isn't a bid further north. And although there are block associations, they're more disparate. And you had sort of a concentration of resources that in the lower part of the district that was able to create open streets. The most successful one, which is on Amsterdam, from 96th to 111th, and it's terrific. I mean, it's people are out in the streets, and the tables are out on a nice night. It feels semi-normal. But what we need is similar infrastructure in place, or organizations that could be responsible for helping to initiate it. You can't solely rely on individual residents to do it themselves, because it's just the process of where to begin and how to be responsible for it takes effort. Also, we need standardization of both the rules and also the equipment. Right, different parts of the city have different equipment to indicate it's an open streets. We need it more standardized and clearer so that cars don't sometimes inadvertently or deliberately run through it and jeopardize the whole point of the program. And I also agree about supporting small businesses. I've called for a capital fund that would direct investment in minority women-owned businesses throughout the district to help them start and restart after the pandemic. That's probably my time.
Okay, thank you. Marty, next on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we all are in agreement that the open streets model has been a wonderful addition to our city, and I'm happy that Clement Rivera's bill just passed about it. But we need to expand it and make sure that, like we've heard from my colleagues, your zip code is not dictating where the open streets are happening. I love the open streets on the 96 to 111th Street, but we need to make sure that the rest of our district is provided these same services. So we need to put resources there, have a public bank so small businesses, minority owned businesses are able to have access to opening a small business, commercial rent stabilization like we heard, and working with our tenant leaders and block associations and small businesses to find the best areas for open streets, and then removing the movable fences to make sure that these spaces are permanent and utilized in a productive way. I think open streets is the pandemic has been horrible, but the silver lining of something that's come out of it is we've shown that our city can be one that is supportive of these positive changes in our communities. We just need to make sure it's equitable in all zip codes, not just wealthier parts of the district.
Okay, thank you. Ray Sanchez.
Maria and Dan made really, really excellent points. I will just supplement that by saying, in sort of supporting the program, what I really want to see, and this is not just for the program, but really for the district, right? And to again agree with Maria in terms of inequities, right? We have a real problem with inequity way trash is collected and dealt with in this district, right? Riverside Drive, parts of Columbia, you have these solar powered big belly contractors, trash compactors, but then you walk on Broadway, 157th, up and down, you've got trash cans overflowing. So I would like to support the program by expanding it to the northern part of the borough of the district, but let's make sure we also put the resources like with trash collection so that we keep the streets clean and we have as many complaints and another way to support small business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ortega.
Yeah, so I support expanding it. I believe the last time that some of us were together, I think it was Mark Levine, Dan, and Stacy, we were on 110th or 111th in Amsterdam, and they had a socially distanced flea market tied to the small businesses that were actually performing live music. That's amazing. I agree with Maria. Bring that to West Harlem, Hamilton Heights, Manhattanville, and Washington Heights. But what I do want to focus on is on the government operations side of this, where I think Dan said it before, standardize it and have it where we have alternating days, again, working from the bottom up, working with the small business associations, working and empowering the block associations. So we move it throughout the district and getting that information out to the community, right? Not just an email, not just a text message, but have government really function almost like a campaign, right? We find our ways to get messages to the voters. We call them. We'll put a flyer on your door on the side, not knock on your door to talk to you, but put it on the side or put up flyers. We have to treat government outreach the same as that campaign and make sure that people know that this is there so they can expect it, they know when it's there, and they can schedule around it if they need to be.
Okay, thank you all very much on that. Our second question is pretty directly from Transportation Alternatives on their 25 by 25 initiative. So I'm going to ask you about the goals of that and if you agree with them, and if so, how would you help achieve this? Which they define 25 by 25 as repurposing 25% of our street space for better use by 2025. And I think I'm right in saying that this is to use space currently used by cars and vehicles. So I'll start with Stacy Lynch on this. We'll go to Dan Cohen, Marty, Ray, Corey, and then Maria. So you've got about a minute to say, do you agree with that goal? And how will you achieve it?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Rachel, I'm torn. I love the proposal. I love it a lot. But I'm not sure if my community at the district will love it. I will say this, I will start by advocating and talking to constituents within the community that feel that, this district needs more parking spaces. and seem to lean more vehicle use as opposed to open spaces and green spaces. And then secondly, if I receive buy-in from my district, I will work closely with the advocates to make this a reality. I think it's important. It deals with health issues across the district, carbon issues, and it creates green spaces for our community that's so needed in this area.
I'll just a follow up on that, because this touches on a theme that happens often, which is just the spectrum between car drivers and everybody else. And I just wanted to drill down on what you alluded to there, which is, you know, on that spectrum, where do you fall? And in your priorities as a city council person, if you're elected, where are your priorities in that spectrum?
To be honest with you, I'm a coalition builder, right? And so, Rachel, I can't say to you right now, my priorities lie here. If personally, I would love to have, you know, 25% of the district available to green and open spaces, right? But, you know, as a representative of the district, hopefully, you know, next year, I have to represent all the district. And so that means sitting with everyone to figure out how we can actually come to some type of agreement, whether you live in the Upper West Side, West Harlem, or Washington Heights. And, you know, hopefully roll out a program that is, if not this, close to something like this. But I can't ignore certain parts of my district for another.
Okay, honest answer, thank you. And Dan, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ambitious, but I think it's worth trying. Particularly for underutilized streets that may not get a lot of car traffic, there may be a way to expand the use for open streets and for green space and reduce the need for cars on those streets. I'll agree with Stacy that I think this is going to have to be an ongoing conversation, because District 7 is not unified on this issue, and it's also a series of smaller neighborhoods that may individually have different perspectives on it. So I think it's going to be worth having a longer conversation with when I get elected to the city council, to be able to talk to people about what streets they think they can that are most likely to be used for this program, and how that would work. And also maybe it's in a similar way that open streets is on weekends and in summer months. Maybe there's a way to sort of maximize it and go beyond 25 in 2025, particularly on warmer weather months when you know, people are out in the street. Maybe in colder weather months, it might diminish and be a little bit more flexible. But I think it's worth trying. There's a lot of space for cars. We've on a separate panel, we've all talked about the possibility of residential parking permits for the district that would focus more on providing parking for people who actually live in the community, as opposed to outsiders who come from further north or from New Jersey, and park in our communities. And then that should change. And those are all part and parcel of a broader effort towards trying to move us towards more space for people and a little diminished for cars. I supported as Friends of Annabella Vilas Playground, as founder and president of the group, we supported the sale of the public parking garages to turn into affordable housing for residents, which was a hard battle because people really were anxious about providing space for their cars. But so far, at least, I mean, it happened shortly. The pandemic has changed the dynamic for parking in the neighborhood. It's not clear yet, but I haven't seen a increased demand for parking so far, and I think we've managed to absorb that change. So
okay. Marty, you're next.
Yeah, I think this is a goal that we can and should be getting done. We need bold leadership who's going to take bold steps to make our streets open, safe, and beneficial to the district, to our small businesses, to environmental justice. So I think this is something that we can accomplish. And the numbers are only 17% of folks from within the district drive. So like Dan said, we need to make sure that they are prioritized in parking, but a lot of our parking spaces are taken up from people coming over the GW Bridge. They park here and take the train downtown or wherever to work. So we need to prioritize the people of our district. So yes, we need to work in coalition. Yes, we need to work with tenants and small businesses. But the fact of the matter is, this is beneficial to the community. Our job as representatives is to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people. And by putting this in by 2025, we're going to be supporting our streets in a safe way, helping environmental justice, expanding green spaces, and creating safe places for our bikers and pedestrians. Right now in 2021, we're in like the 5th month of 2021, and pedestrian deaths are already 58% higher. So we need to be doing everything we can to create safe streets, safe spaces. And so I'm committed to doing everything I can in my power as the elected to achieve this goal with you by 2025.
Okay, thank you. Ray?
Yeah, no, I very much want to support and pursue this goal. You know, but we have to be honest about and sell it to folks, right? Because the reality is before the pandemic, a lot of parking spots got taken up by City Bike, right? And then so the supply went down, and then because of the pandemic, the demand for cars went up because I mean the data is there. How many people started buying up cars because they didn't trust mass transit again? So in order to achieve this goal, we got to get back to building up trust in mass transit. All right, when like every day, like watching New York One, watching the head of the MTA. Asking for, complaining about safety of their transit workers, right? We got to ensure the safety of transit workers. We got to ensure the safety of the riding public. We have to, again, recreate that buy-in so people who bought cars in the pandemic want to give them up. But that's about buying and discourse and selling the vision of where we can be, right? And that's the opportunity of the time we're in. That is the opportunity of the crisis, is saying, all right, with fewer and fewer people going back to the office, right? Fewer and fewer people after COVID living and rethinking how they live and work. We should absolutely be bold with, okay, all right, maybe you don't need that car, or maybe we don't need all that office space, and we turn that into schools and maybe parking garages so that people who want their weekend cars have a place for it. But you have to drive it and sell it and be inclusive towards the goal, but embrace the goal.
Rachel,
Okay.
can I say something really quickly, and I'll turn it back over to you. The proposal I agree with, right? I think it's a worthwhile proposal, but I also want to be realistic. We do have a parking problem within this district, and part of that is compounded by institutions that are in this district, like a Columbia University, City College of New York Presbyterian, and Mount Sinai. And most of those folks, a lot of those folks come into the district as drivers, right?
Yeah, actually, the next question is on parking permits. So we can go into that question to have a conversation about that next. But I want to finish on this point first, and then we'll go into that. So Ray, if you're okay, I'm going to go to Corey, and then we're going to go to Maria, and then we'll move on to that.
Yeah, so I support the 25-25 challenge. Because I'm going to highlight a few of the things that we already agree on. 500 lane miles of new protected bus-only lanes to make sure that our community can go where they choose to, whether work or leisure. 500 lanes of protected class bike lanes, and especially 1,000 lane miles of permanent open street, right? So we agree on that point. The last point, which I'm really interested in, Ray made a point in terms of garbage, at least 80-foot long zone every block for deliveries, e-cargo bikes, for hire vehicles, taxi drivers, and trash collection. So our trash bags are off the sidewalk, right? We know that essential workers, the definition has changed over time, and this would make it easier for essential workers to get to and from. But I do share the sentiment of Stacy, Dan, I think someone else said it, forgive me for forgetting, that we also have to bring this to the community, right? And government has to do a good job not only of bringing this proposal to the community so we can get feedback, because we're elected officials. There's certain things we could say, okay, yeah, I'm going to help you come to my office. You have a housing emergency, but what do the rest of the district, where would they fall on this, and how would they want us to proceed? And making sure that we have language justice for that, having a multiple language so people can understand what we're doing on their behalf as government representatives. So okay. Yes and yes.
Okay, thank you. Maria?
All right, so I absolutely support the initiative. I think it's absolutely possible. And I think the question should be where, right? Where are we going to meet this goal, this 25% goal? You know, are we just going to meet it by doing it in Union Square, Hell's Kitchen, and in Hamilton Heights, and just in Manhattan? Or are we going to try to make sure that it's all across the city? You know, because for me, you know, we look at District 7, we can absolutely, you know, start, you know, opening up streets in District 7 because people have access to transportation. Because to me, like someone who was born and raised in West Harlem, someone who was born and raised in the city, when I traveled around, you know, it's obvious that there's some places that are just literally transportation deserts. So we need to make sure that we're also looking at the root of the problem here, right? A lot of areas in the city are transportation deserts. If we look at Eastern Queens, they don't have access to transportation, so they need cars. To strip away cars from Eastern Queens residents is just absolutely wrong. You can't do that because then you're harming working class New Yorkers instead of supporting them. So making sure that we're creating access to transportation, true access to it, and making sure people can you know afford it, making it free and making it accessible all across the city. So this is an initiative that stretches all across the city, not just Manhattan, I think would be extremely important. But beyond that, you know, I think that we do need to move forward as a city to make sure that we're reducing the use of cars. We're expanding bus lanes. We're making sure that we're protecting streets. And I think this initiative does put all of this forward. And I think that making sure that it is all across the city is extremely important.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about parking for a moment. And this is going to go for Dan, Marty, Ray, Corey, Maria, and then Stacy, just so you've got the order. I would like to know if you support making permits for residents for parking in the district. Is that something that you'd like to see? And if not, you know, what's your stance on, do you feel like there is enough parking in the district? Do you want to see more of it or less of it? Simple. Go ahead, Stacy. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I already?
I'm last, Rachel.
Dan. Go ahead.
I do support exploring residential parking permits for the neighborhood. There has been a study which suggested that if you create residential parking permits, you actually increase the likelihood of some people getting cars because then they now have a place to park it. But I still think it may be unbalanced because it would reserve more parking spaces for the people who live here. And then for, I can't remember who made the reference point about the institutions that are that have a lot of cars that come in from outside and park in the district. Maybe there should be also for the institutions, you know, try to push them towards moving their employees towards public transit or alternatives to taking their cars. And disincentivizing them to drive, because I think that's part of the challenge as well, is that those institutions, many of which, you know, provide jobs and taxes and economy for our neighborhood, also have a big footprint, carbon and otherwise. So, and then, sorry, there was a second part to your question about.
Do you feel like, I just am curious if you feel
enough
like there's
parking?
enough parking, I mean, or should be less?
I don't think there'll ever be enough parking, right? You're never going to have people say like, oh, it's good. We have plenty of parking. It's fine. It's plenty. I mean, that's never going to happen. There's always going to be people who feel that there isn't enough parking. And I think that's the nature of living in the city, is that we're as I've said on before, the New Yorkers are a bunch of grouchy people. Like, you know, there are things that there's not enough housing, and transportation isn't sufficient, and the education system is inequitable, and there's not enough parking. Yeah, those things are probably true. Some of those things we can fix, and I think I don't think we should create more parking. I want to discourage people from having their cars. I want to move people towards other options as much as we can, whether that's financially or just through making it easier to access transportation. It's why I've called for, in fact, an Amtrak stop at 125th and 12th Avenue, because it will take pressure off the one line and make it fully ADA accessible. The only elevator in the entire district is at 96th Street, and you have to live close to it, then good for you. But if you live further away and you have mobility issues, you're pretty much out of luck. You can take a bus, but if you want to get further quickly, there's no real efficient way to do that. And we can build an elevator at 125th Street, but it'll take 10 years on the MTA's plan. We can put a train stop at 125th and 12th, and it will make 8 minutes to Midtown Manhattan, and also be fully ADA compliant. I'll stop there.
Okay, Marty?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to be making sure that we're exploring permits for residents of the district. So we're not having an influx of folks from, Jersey or Westchester or whatever parking in our district and then going elsewhere. So I would love to explore that. So Dan, I'm happy to team up with you on that. And also looking at, the big entities that employ people, finding alternative ways for their employees to get around and exploring that as well. But we also need to make sure a lot of folks who do have cars, the 17% of people in our district who do have cars might be disabled. So we need to make sure or not able to because the subway is not ADA compliant, that maybe their only way of transportation. And if somebody's coming from, Jersey and parking here, that's taking up that precious spot that resident who's disabled needs. I do support having alternate transportation on 125th. I will say though, I think Maria brought this up at another forum we did though, the Amtrak is expensive. So we have to make sure that there's a fares fair program with that, or that, we're working with Amtrak to ensure that it's accessible to folks who might be income insecure or not able to afford Amtrak to get around in that way. But yeah, I think our parking, I mean, I don't know. I don't think New Yorkers are grouchy. I think we're just fed up. But I do think there's, I don't know. Yeah, I think parking should be for the actual people who live here.
Okay. Ray, same question to you. How do you feel generally about the parking in the district? Do you think there needs to be more, less, and would you try to restrict it to residents?
Parking has gotten worse in this district over the last few years. You can just see, you can clock it when you try to look for a spot, and it's bad. It takes longer to get a spot now than it did a year or two ago. So no, parking has gotten worse, and it needs to be dealt with. I absolutely support a pilot program for the residents, and actually, and I love, but I will go on record and say I love Dan Cohen's 12th Avenue Metro North, Amtrak stop. We should all be chiming in on that. When I was in the borough president's office, we got East Bronx Metro North funded, right? So we need more rail, whether it's the RPA's tri-borough line, which is a great proposal, whether it's actually getting the because it's all all comes together, right? I love that Joe Biden and the federal government are funding East Side Access, right? Because we need more people to stop driving across the George Washington and taking the rail. You got to think about it in multiple directions, right? For example, the Metro North stop at Fordham Road and the East Bronx Metro North was all huge because it opened up job opportunities for Bronxites up in Stamford and up in Connecticut. Just the way that Metro North, the Amtrak station at 12th Avenue, could be a way for people to commute into Penn Station, shoot up 25th, and be in the district and maybe not have to drive in over the George Washington. So it's having that holistic vision of like, how do we get cars down across the board, and give people a reason to give them up.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there because I'm looking at the clock and we've got to get through some things before we finish. So Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would support the pilot program. It actually plays into the 25 and 25 where you respect the 17% and make sure that they have parking because they live there, whether disabled or not, and then expanding other parts of the district to coincide with the citywide initiative. There's never going to be enough parking. This is the city. That's just the truth of it. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, Maria.
Yeah, so I do support a pilot program for residents of the district so we can park. And I think that it'd be great that if we incentivize the use of public transportation for people who are coming out of state from different areas outside of the city. But if they do use cars, maybe add an extra tax, and that tax can go into funding a social service, can go into funding something in the community. I also do support what Dan said, the 12th Avenue train station. We're all supporting that, Dan. We're all behind you. And what I will say about the question about enough parking in the district, I do think New Yorkers can be grumpy, but I also think the New Yorkers have grown up with a culture of driving cars. It's a very, the city that never sleeps, right? There's always cars around and everything. So ending that car culture is something. It's not like you're going to add 10 more spots and people are going to say it's enough. It's never going to be enough until you end that car culture, until you have a conversation about it, an open dialogue, and we actually start talking about the benefits of not having so many cars in the streets for, in terms of health, in terms of the community, and then we're going to be able to say we have enough.
Okay, thank you. And Stacy.
I'll be short and sweet. I don't think New Yorkers are grumpy. I just think they want a certain quality of life, considering how much we pay for rent and other stuff. So with that being said, for New Yorkers that drive, I'm particularly in this district, I'm open to a pilot program to improve their quality of life. Done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're gonna take a question from the folks who are watching, and the answers for this one will start with Marty, go to Ray, then Corey, Maria, Stacy, and Dan. And it's a question on supporting New Yorkers with disabilities. The person says, now that disability has been mentioned, how do you plan on supporting people with disabilities in the district, especially those who use Access-a-Ride and may need to use a car sometimes on our inaccessible train system? So any ideas for helping people with disabilities get around? Go ahead, Marty.
First of all, our city is sadly not built for people with disabilities. There's hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers don't have access to our MTA because only 24% of our subways are ADA compliant. That to me is criminal negligence. It's insane that we're not providing systems for people to get around. So we need to provide real funding for Access-a-Ride so people can get around, so people are able to get around. We need to make sure that all of our businesses, our small businesses, are equipped for people to get in and out of. And if they're not able to, a lot of our small businesses are struggling. So they should be able to have grants to help them update their facilities so people can get in and out of their business. Our city is it's a lack of moral leadership, I think, that we've left so many people out of our city in this way. So funding Access-a-Ride, prioritizing the parking permit program to prioritize our disabled community, and then working not just on a city level, but with our state legislators to make sure, I know Dan mentioned it will take 10 years to put an elevator in, but let's look at the priority stations that really need these places, get the funding, advocate with the MTA that's controlled in Albany, and get our MTA accessible to all people. And that does take a long time, but the work starts now. I just want to close with our buses. Our buses are ADA compliant, but we need to make sure that the curbs are set up in a way that people are able to have them protected bus lanes, expanded protected bus lanes, so people are safe as they're getting on and off the bus. I think is incredibly important as well.
Thank you. Ray?
Marty hit a lot of the points, right? And Dan said earlier about the lack of ADA compliance in our subway system, which is ridiculous. But we should have absolutely additional expanding of Access-a-Ride. Why isn't there an Uber type service for Access-a-Ride so you can create drive efficiencies so you can lower over the cost? We should be using electric cars and have a fleet to facilitate access to and scheduling and improving. This is a technology solvable problem that you can interface with 311 through an app, schedule people's rides, book it in advance, drive down the cost of the program so more people can participate. It's like when you get economies of scale, the costs go down for everyone. And that's really what we got to look about, have an holistic approach to, because ultimately, whether if you have certain disabilities, you don't really have a choice but the car. So consequently, we need a greater investment in Access-a-Ride and expanding bus rides, ADA access on our mass transit. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey, next one.
Yeah, so I would say three things. Number one, definitely work on city and state coordinated efforts for real funding for the MTA so it could be accessible, but that's going to take time. That's going to take time realistically. I would say that revamping the Access-a-Ride program also falls into the 25 and 25 challenge because we want to add a loading zone or a long zone access that will apply to Access-a-Ride for pickup and drop off. But like Ray said, we have to go a step further and revamp the Access-a-Ride program. The feedback that I've gotten over the years in my district has been that the pickup times are garbled. They'll tell you, yeah, they're coming. They give you a window. It's too large of a window, too big of a window. Also, when they come, sometimes they don't have the right size vehicle. They may have too many passengers, and now we have to take into account COVID and the safety restrictions. So I believe we have to, not believe, when elected to city council or any of my colleagues who are lucky enough to win, to revamp the Access-a-Ride program, bring it up to the 21st century so that it can truly be accessible to everyone while we work on the rest of the 25 and 25 challenge.
Thank you. Maria?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot that has been said. I do think that we need to make sure that all public transportation is ADA compliant. We do need to revamp the Access-a-Ride program. We need to make sure that it is, we're leading with that in the 21st century, and we're making sure that people can have access to that. I also agree with what has been said about small businesses, making sure that they are ADA compliant and people can have access to those. And I will add one thing about making sure that we have representation of the disabled community in our community boards, making sure that we have a committee on disability rights, disability justice, making sure that we're appointing more people from that community into our community board so they have a voice, and that when we're deciding on local stuff like the small business or zoning or land use procedures or whatever it is, or schools, they have a voice and they're speaking up and bringing their experience to the decision making table and making sure that that's in the forefront too.
Okay, thank you.
Am I next, Rachel?
Yeah. Yes, you are.
Okay, really quickly. As I agree with Maria, giving the disabled community a voice. As someone who is a caretaker to a mom who's disabled herself, and also receiving the endorsement of the 504 Democratic Club, I think it's critically important to have the disabled community at the table when we're making these decisions. One of the things that I will do when elected and when I become council member is work with, hopefully, the current commissioner, Victor Calisi, and members of the disabled community to figure out a true ADA compliance plan for not just District 7, but across the city. In regards to Access-a-Ride, it's cumbersome. I use it for my mom. I attempted to use it for my mom. The process itself is so difficult to get her signed up. And so to start with Access-a-Ride, I think we just need to make the application process simpler, right? And then invest in this program more so that we can employ people throughout the city and provide more access to the disabled community where riders and drivers are not cramped for time to pick up passengers, drop them off, et cetera.
Thank you. We're running into time and we're gonna have to go to the next forum, but I'm gonna do one more question, then we'll do closing, and then we'll wrap up.
Do I get
I'm
to
so
answer
sorry. Yeah, of course. Yes.
So
Dan,
very
go
briefly,
ahead.
Ray made the point about a program that would be call on demand, and Access-a-Ride has been a disaster. People waiting for hours and are stranded. And there was actually a pilot program similar to, I think, what Ray was making reference to, that you could call any sort of vehicle for hire, and it worked actually quite well, at much higher satisfaction from people who used it. And then it was inexplicably canceled. And I wonder if perhaps it has something to do with the Access-a-Ride contract, not to get too conspiracy theory, but there's a lot of money at stake, and perhaps that may have contributed to its cancellation. At least that's what I read about, that there was some misunderstanding about why that program, which was working, was canceled. And I think, we have ride hail on apps on phones. We should be able to move to that as opposed to the scheduling that Stacy has encountered so difficulty with her mom. I'll stop there. I know you're short on time, but I wanted to just put that point in.
Okay, thank you. And apologies about that. In my effort to do an equitable, round robin sort of style, I lost track of who was speaking. Okay, so the last question, and then we'll go to closing, is just about the fact that many transportation related projects and initiatives are out of the city's hands. Obviously we know that the state controls the MTA. If you want to get funding for a big project, you've got to perhaps even get federal involvement. So I wanted to ask each of you, why are you the best person at the city council level to be a person who lobbies and who cajoles and who gets people together to actually make some of these things happen, because they will not be in city control? So I'm going to start with Ray on that question. Then we'll go to Corey, Maria, Stacy, Dan, and Marty. Okay. So what's your pitch for being someone in the city council who can actually get things done with the state?
Excellent question, right? So I'll point to my time in the Bronx Borough President's office. My former boss, Borough President Diaz, who's endorsed me, as well as State Senator Andrew Granardis from Brooklyn. We were constantly lobbied on city and state issues because my boss spent 13 years in the assembly in Albany. He also chaired Governor Cuomo's reelection campaign. So we were always peppered with city and state issues. We were always going up to Albany. I was there when Carl Hastie got sworn in as the first African-American leader of the assembly. So I have I've been living city and state for a very long time. And when they know you, it makes getting together a whole lot easier in terms of trying to figure out answers and solutions to complex problems. Having, being an attorney by trade and knowing a lot about a lot of different things, whether it's being on the franchise board, being on the pension board, being a trustee of New York City's $200 billion pension system. I've literally had lawmakers call me, "Hey Ray, can you brief me on MWE stuff? Because I'm about to do an interview with a reporter." So, I can't, I lived it and I know it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Corey?
So what makes me qualify for this is my 12 years of experience in nonprofit, city and state government, the New York State Assembly, and also recently the New York City Council's Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus. And basically, you want a council member that not only is going to pass legislation and budget on the city level, but can be an organizer, can be an advocate. And I have that experience working with the state legislature. And like Ray said, right, having that behind the scenes experience where you could have candid conversations and really become a lobbyist for your own community. But the good news is, and this is going to be the cheesy moment, the good news is that we have ranked choice voting, right? So not only do I have that type of experience, right? Stacy Lynch has that experience in City Hall with state legislature, right? Maria Ordonez also has that experience in terms of the new generation coming in and moving quick to garner so much attention and support, right? Marti Allen-Cummings has, God knows, the most endorsements in this race. They're gonna lean on those endorsements to make sure to advocate. And Dan also has, God knows how many years of experience, also with elected officials like Robert Jackson, to make sure that we push this effort on the state level. So regardless of what happens, one of us will be in a good position to make that transition to execute on that actual need, from need to actual monies for our community.
Maria, how will you handle the relationship outside of the city for transit related projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, thank you, Corey. I agree. There's ranked choice voting. A lot of us can lead in our different ways. But what I would say from my side, I'm going to be a voice for the community. I'm already leading with my campaign. I'm showing that, I'm not taking real estate money. I'm not taking money for corporate interests. So I'm committed to my community. I'm committed to a model where we co-govern with our people. We co-govern and co-legislate with the community. So making sure that we're putting the community first and making sure that in any and all decisions, they are the ones who are with me deciding what we do for this community. And that being said, we bring the voices to the locals, the state, to the federal level, because at the end of the day, for all of these positions, well, all these people I will be working with at the state legislature, at the federal level, all of these people have to get elected either way, just like I have to get elected. So at the end of the day, all of these people have to come and they have to be the voice that's leading. And I'm also an organizer and organizing my community, and I know my community, I know what they need. So I'm going to be that voice for them, and I'm going to be that new voice to make sure that we have true change in City Hall and we co-govern together.
Thank you. Stacy?
So Rachel, at the core, I am an advocate and an organizer. And, I think most of the policy, if not all of it, that Transportation Alternative is proposing, I agree with. And so I can tell you that, I've pushed elected officials and community groups to support an issue and get an issue passed, whether it was legislation, mayoral control, or even pushing my boss to consider reversing, or my former boss, I should say, reversing his position on issues like e-bikes. And so, I have the relationships. I have long-standing relationships with both advocates and elected officials. And I'll use that experience, that 10 plus years, maybe all of my life experience, to bring people together to get real solutions done, not only for this community, but for the city.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Real talk.
I mean, I have 30 years of experience, and I've lived in the district for my whole life, for 50 years, and that comes with a lot of deep roots and connections across the district to deliver for it. I helped deliver $75,000 to plant trees and tree beds on a local level, and through my work with the Housing Partnership, I helped create and preserve 40,000 units of affordable housing across the city, and that work required me to work with city, state, and federal elected officials to be able to get that sort of work done. And also would say that for any one of us, we're also at a moment, bringing it back to transportation, where we have Amtrak Joe in the White House and we have Democratic control of Congress. We actually really haven't had this sort of confluence of good opportunity in quite some time. And maybe the last opportunity we spent it on healthcare, which was appropriate. And we now have an opportunity with an infrastructure bill to really deliver into our community. And I think that moment is ripe for us to work with, and any one of us, I think, would be able to accomplish that. And I appreciate Corey's nod and acknowledging that for all of us on this call. We have a chance now, and I think that we're going to seize it. Whoever one of us, any of the six of us that gets elected, to be able to deliver for this district.
Thank you. Marty?
Thank you so much for hosting tonight's forum. And yes, ranked choice voting is amazing. So I encourage the folks watching to utilize this amazing new process in our city. But I'll just say, I'm a big believer in coalition building, whether as a candidate or an activist or an organizer, or hopefully the elected, and we're already doing that work with our small businesses, our tenant leaders, our block associations, with other candidates across the city, because there's going to be 50 other council members that I'm going to have to work with when putting through legislation. So forming coalitions, working with the people who are in office. And our campaign is the campaign with the most Albany support from the progressive leaders who took a stand and went against the status quo and won their elections. We've been endorsed by Senators Gustavo Rivera, Julia Salazar, Alessandra Biaggi, Assembly members Catalina Cruz and Yuli New, and ranked endorsement with Senator Robert Jackson. So I have those connections and am able to utilize that to get budgets that are equitable, to put in legislation that's going to put forth the issues that are important, like the ones we talked about tonight. The status quo isn't working. Typical isn't working. We need bold leadership who's not afraid to be loud and to stand up and say, this is BS. We need to get real action taken care of now. The time is running, out. We need leaders who are going to do the work. And I believe that I'm the best suited for this role in this moment. And I'm excited to get to work. But of course, like we heard, there is ranked choice voting. So I encourage people to utilize this in June.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are going to wrap it up there. I think that all of those answers served quite well as a sort of closing statement. So we're going to forego closings and move on to the next section of this forum. Thank you all for the great conversation. Thank you for running. Good luck with your campaigns. And I'll ask you to exit the room. And I'm going to just wait a couple more minutes. I will give patience to the next people coming on, just to give us a time to reorganize and get set for the next District 10 forum. So thank you, District 7 candidates.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're back for our second hour for District 10 candidates for City Council. And I'll just ask the candidates to come onto video so we can get started. Hello, hello. Thank you all for being here. So I'm Rachel Holliday Smith. I am the Manhattan reporter for The City, which is a nonprofit, reader-supported independent newsroom that covers the 5 boroughs, in case you don't know or haven't heard of us yet. So tonight we are speaking with some candidates from City Council District 10, and I want to thank Transportation Alternatives for hosting. And I also just want to shout out the other sponsors of the event, which is Riders Alliance, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, Families for Safe Streets, and Streetopia Upper West Side. So we've just got, well, less than an hour now, and we're going to just dive right in because we have a lot of things to cover. Just so the candidates know, and the folks who are watching, this is going to be more of a conversation than a debate. So I'm going to be keeping time, but it's going to be a little bit loose, but I would ask you to keep things moving along so that we can get through a lot of questions. And I'll just remind you if you're going too long, but we will not have a timer. So let's just meet our candidates. I'll introduce you, just wave, and then we'll do some opening statements for a minute, okay? So in alphabetical order, we have Carmen De La Rosa, who is the current assembly member in the district, Angela Fernandez, former executive director of the Northern Manhattan Immigrant Rights Coalition, Johanna Garcia, currently the chief of staff for State Senator Robert Jackson, and Josue Perez, who is a public school math teacher. Thank you all for being here. So let's start with opening statements, and you'll have 1 minute, and I'll go in reverse alphabetical order just to mix things up. So Mr. Perez, if you could go ahead with a minute, introduce yourself to the folks who are watching.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this together. Maybe we'll be faster. There's less candidate than District 7.
Yes, true.
Well, my name is Josue Perez. As you mentioned, I'm a math teacher for over 20 years in the educational system. Not only just teaching, but I also been engaged with the community. I'm bringing progress to our school, but not to my school alone, but also building coalitions with the city department and the math department across the city. I also bring the programs for computer science for all to my school, and I was able to allocate those funds to different schools. When I got here as a young boy, as an immigrant from the Dominican Republic, one of the first things I did was to join one of the nonprofit to be a tutor for math, because I believe in helping our students. Teaching is in my DNA. Both my parents were teachers. I'm a teacher for over 20 years. I'm a public servant, and that's what I'm going to do once I'm elected to City Council.
Thank you. Ms. Garcia? 1 minute.
Hi. First, thanks to all the sponsors for holding this forum tonight. My name is Johanna Garcia. I am running for City Council in District 10, which represents the neighborhoods of Washington Heights, Inwood, and Marble Hill. It is the district where I was born and raised. It is the district where I am raising my 3 children as a single working mother. I am running because in building coalitions in this neighborhood, and when I'm talking about coalitions, I'm talking about the fights that we have had to face as a community. Education inequities, I fought alongside other parents, not only in the PTA, but also as president of CEC 6 for all schools. We walked 150 miles to bring $4 billion to our schools so that we can start talking about real equity in our schools. I fought along my neighbors to push back against the inward rezoning, because we wanted to make sure that scores and generations of families get to stay here. And I was the co-founder of North Manhattan's Not For Sale. And I also built coalitions with my neighbors against the IDC so we could bring down the corruption that our district and our state actually was dealing with. I am running because I have lived the issues that we are trying to champion. I have the experience as chief of staff in the city council and now chief of staff in the state senate. And together I know that we can make the change that this district has been waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fernandez.
Thank you. My name is Angela Fernandez. I am a single mom. I'm 50 years old, and it's my first time running for office. My mother migrated here from the Dominican Republic, and she worked in factories to produce the only lawyer in the family. I graduated from Columbia Law School, and my mother said that with that very powerful tool, Angela, you must use it to uplift our community. And those are the values that I've always carried with me. I was the executive director for 10 years of the Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigrant Rights, where we prevented the deportation of thousands of our neighbors. We helped tens of thousands of our neighbors become US citizens. And we, with our neighbors, wrote the sanctuary laws and got them passed when it was extremely unpopular to do so. I was also the former New York State Commissioner for the Division of Human Rights, running a 200-person agency of investigators, lawyers, and administrative law judges. And within 1 year was able to turn that agency around and increase our monetary damages to people who had been discriminated against by 25%. We need a city council member that actually understands what's at stake and already has the experience at both combining social justice work from a grassroots level and also governmental work at the highest level that I've done, which is running a statewide agency. And I would love to be your city council member. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly member.
Thank you. I'm Carmen De La Rosa. Many of you know me as the assembly member for the 72nd District, which is the communities of Inwood, Washington Heights, and Marble Hill. But I'm here to earn your support and to have the conversations about my candidacy for City Council for District 10. I am a proud product of this community, immigrating here from the Dominican Republic as a baby, where I am now raising my daughter. She's 7 years old. She goes to public school right here in the neighborhood. The issues of this community are personal to me, are personal to us. And that's why I'm running, because in the last 4 years that I've been your state representative in Albany, I've always listened and I've delivered for our community. Working together, we've been able to transform Albany. We've been able to pass the New York State DREAM Act, which I led. We've been able to pass tenant reforms. Working with a coalition, grassroots coalition of advocates from the community, we made those changes. And most recently, we've been at the forefront of the fight for excluded workers, making sure that there is a just recovery for our communities from the COVID-19 for everyone. I'm looking forward to bring this energy, my passion and my advocacy to the city council in 2022, because we're gonna have a whole new council. We're gonna have a new council speaker. We're going to have a new mayor. And it is important that we elect leaders who are bold and who have a track record of delivering for this community. I wanna bring this spirit and this fight to City Hall, and specifically for this forum. I believe in livable, walkable streets. I worked at the city council for over 5 years. I have 15 years of government experience. And in that time, I worked under the chair of the Transportation Committee. And so I know some of these issues very personally, and I know how important it is to have every side of the community heard in what is our investment in transportation and infrastructure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, so before we get into the real meaty, substantive questions, I just want to start with a quick one, which is, what's your favorite way of getting around the district? What is it? Biking? Is it the subway? Is it walking? Is it car, driving, bus? And I'm going to start with Assembly member on that one. What's your favorite way to get around the neighborhood?
Thank you. I walk a lot. But when I'm not walking, I do take the train, the bus, but I mostly walk. I love to walk, and I have my my Fitbit, so I count my steps.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Ms. Fernandez, what's your favorite way to get around?
No, I would agree. I really love walking. I have to say, though, that sometimes it is a little hard because our district is very hilly. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of up and down stairs and up and down hills, but it's a great exercise.
Okay, Ms. Garcia, same question to you.
Same. The best way to get around is walking, and I have to agree with Angela. And it's something that the Board of Elections continues to not understand how hilly topography is up here in Upper Manhattan. But also, you know, it's a good excuse to walk through the parks and enjoy that.
Okay, Mr. Perez, what's your favorite way of getting around your best way?
I think we all agreed on the same answers, but I could just tell you something that one of the reasons I haven't moved from Washington Heights is because everything is closed. I love having like 5 restaurants close by, walk to the playground, walk to the basketball court, and that's what I like to do, move around. And when I'm in the district, there's only those choice by walking, and I wanted to make sure that there's also a safe way for us to do it.
Okay, great, thank you, and we will get into that. So let's start with the first question, and I'm switching up the order for each one so everybody has a first chance to answer first. So it'll go Ms. Fernandez, Ms. Garcia, Mr. Perez, and then Assemblymember De La Rosa for this one. So I want to start with the frequent fight between car drivers and everybody else, usually cyclists, and fights about bike lanes. I know this is a contentious topic everywhere in Manhattan, but particularly in this district. I want you to answer where you see yourself in the spectrum between cyclists who want more safety and car drivers who feel hamstrung by changing roadways. So which do which will you prioritize and which do you identify more with? And again, starting with Ms. Fernandez.
Sure. So, I think that one of the things that's critically important to do that I don't think government has done well, especially when it comes to infrastructure, is actually doing what would be called very meaningful engagement with all of the community, with all of the people that would be directly impacted. And because by not doing that, then you have situations that feel like they're imposed on a community or on a neighborhood. And then the reaction ends up actually not really being helpful for everyone involved. And so I would agree that we need a city that is accessible to everyone, so that you can have people that want to ride their bicycles can ride their bicycles. And we know that that runs the gamut from people who are doing it for exercise to people who are doing it because that's their job, the delivery workers. But we also have the reality of what exists today, which is small businesses that have to be able to upload and download their wares and their goods in front of particular stores. And so that's been really at the crux of the debate in Washington Heights and Inwood around bike lanes. So I think my answer is actually let's do this, but let's do it right in a way that actually will be beneficial to everyone involved, and that's going to require real meaningful input, and it's going to take longer, but we're going to have a better outcome in the end.
So it sounds like your goal is to make things safer for cyclists and pedestrians, but that you want more input. Is that a right way to interpret what you just said?
No, I absolutely want it to be safer for everyone, but we absolutely have to. We have to do this in a way that provides real, meaningful feedback, and feedback that gets translated into something tangible and real for the people that are also going to be affected by this.
Okay. Ms. Garcia,
and I'll give a perfect example. Maybe let me be more clear. For example, in Dykeman, bicycle lanes were put up, and they just kind of showed up out of nowhere on both sides of the street. And the reaction, there was a very strong uproar from the small business owners because there was no meaningful engagement with the small business owners before it happened. The end result was that one of the bike lanes was removed on one side as a solution to that. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Garcia, same question to you.
So I will lean towards safety for bicyclists, and I'll tell you why. First, maybe I'm biased because I don't drive. The Department of Motor Vehicles thinks that I should, but I just want to make sure I don't drive. But in all seriousness, I want my children to feel comfortable on the road biking. And I know that this is a community where those conversations have to bring all stakeholders. And when I mention stakeholders, I'm talking about families. I'm talking about the small business owners, as Angela mentioned, and I'm talking about those that are, avid bicyclists. The reality is that most of these conversations are checked off as having been like a real conversation at the community boards. And I know that the Department of Transportation, they do outreach. They have been talking about where they're gonna put up these loading docks for the bikes, for the city bike for a while. But they've done it in a very superficial way. And I think that when you don't have a deep conversation with the community and actually engage them in a deep way, they do get a little resistant and reactionary, and they don't understand really what the health benefits are in terms of easing congestion, in terms of making sure that everyone's safe of all ages. So definitely, I lean towards making sure that we're safe for our bicyclists.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perez, where do you see yourself on the spectrum between
There's complex
cyclists and-
issues. I think we have to look at it differently, from a different approach. It's like when I'm teaching, like each classroom is a different. I support bicycling, of course. I love bicycling myself. But I think in our district, most people that use bicycle, they use it for recreation purpose. It's hard to see doing business in a bike, especially as except the delivery, of course. But I would like to see if one thing that I love about New York City is the city that keep moving, the city that never sleep. And I think we have done a very poor job on deciding where to locate those bicycles lane. I think we need more, but we have to coexist. It's not about hating one, hating the other. Like the example, Angela mentioned Dyckman. I did the outreach. I went to the small business. I talked to them, and I joined the fight to remove the bicycle lane from Dyckman because I think there is so many other streets. Again, we could have it, but it's where is it located and how it's going to affect the traffic, how it's going to affect the quality of life for our neighborhood. We're lucky also that we have beautiful parks and there are that with bike trails. So we have to make sure that we have the bikes lane redesigned in a way that is for quality of life, but also we're gonna make sure that the people that don't have other way of meeting on transportation that car, they also be able to coexist. I'm visiting a lot of cities around the US and they mostly have municipal parking. Why don't we have more of this? Why don't we have residential parking? And it's very easy. All we have to do is do the work and come together and come for solutions.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember De La Rosa, same question to you.
Thank you. I'm going to answer the question in two parts. First, I will say that I lean towards the safety of the pedestrian and the cyclist because they're more at harm's way. A car that is speeding over 25 speed limit is going to kill someone. And our community desperately needs to slow down. But I also think that that we have to change the frame of the conversation. The conversation can't be any longer them versus us. I think that our city is moving towards a place where bicycling, e-scooters are now a form of transportation. When I see people headed downtown on their bikes, they're headed to work. So they are a form of getting to work. We have to make sure that the infrastructure is in place for people to do that safely. I like Johanna, I also think about my child, right? I get panic attacks when we're reaching a corner and she's running because I think she's gonna cross the street and cars are going way too fast in our community. We have to learn how to share space. The conversation about the Dyckman bike lanes, I had a first row seat for that conversation. I have to say that those conversations were happening in our communities for a really long time. The problem is that they're happening in silos where there's a lot of conversation happening at the community board level, but there's not targeted conversation one-on-one, sort of like how a campaign does it, where a campaign goes door to door and has actual conversations with people who are not really on the community board level. That would be the aspect of it that I would change in the city council, is that I would have a more targeted conversation with folks in our community. And the other thing that I want to mention is that we do have our small businesses that take advantage of the infrastructure because our delivery services, anytime we order food, those people are using the bike lanes, they're using the infrastructure that's in place in order to deliver that service. So we have to see a value to that. And we have to have the conversation with our small businesses about the benefits of having some of this infrastructure.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question, which is about the future of Vision Zero, or making pedestrians safer, essentially. As you likely saw, pedestrian fatalities are surging this year, and they're actually higher than when Mayor de Blasio took office. That was according to analysis by Transportation Alternatives that was reported by Gothamist. Can you tell us your assessment of the mayor's Vision Zero campaign, what it got wrong and what you see as the solution to decrease pedestrian injuries and fatalities if you get elected to city council? And I will start with Ms. Garcia on that question.
You know, I think it's ironic, but it's worth mentioning that my colleagues and I are running to fill the seat held by the chair of transportation. And we have seen very fraught conversations, intense conversations around pedestrian safety and cyclist safety. And, when it comes to Vision Zero, I think that what the mayor himself has gotten wrong is that what we mostly see are superficial cosmetic tinkering of the policy. It is reactionary. We've had a very, very reactionary administration in City Hall. Unfortunately, reactionary means that someone got very seriously injured or fatally injured. And we have an administration that just focuses on press conferences on a corner. And I think what we need to do to really get at the heart of the increase of fatalities is really go into the heart of our neighborhoods, have conversations where drivers are not just drivers, they're in the laundromats, they are in the barbershops, they're in the hair salons, they're in our churches, and they're in our schools before they graduate and they get that license. So I think we need to have a very culturally neighborhood level response of what it means to be safe on the road. And at the end of the day, we also have to make sure that we have less cars on the road. I think less cars, it's pretty like 1 + 1 = less pedestrian injuries.
Could I ask you to, and this is for the rest of the candidates as well, when you answer, which is, could you point to a policy change that you'd like to see happen if you were elected to the city council to steer in this direction? What would be a first priority for you, or an idea that you'd want to implement from a policy perspective?
Yes, one of the first things that I would want to do is, and it's because I've heard this over and over, we need more speed bumps, especially around where we have, I don't want to use the word sensitive, but where we have high risk populations, like near our schools, near our hospitals, or near our senior centers. We need more speed bumps to force a slowdown in that area.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Perez, same question to you. And again, what do you see as the solution to decreasing pedestrian fatalities, and what is a policy idea that you would want to implement in the city council on this point?
Yes, like I believe that our district, again, is very different for the rest of New York City. Like, if you know, our district is very narrow. And that's what I mean by when I mean, like, people mostly, it is very easy to get by train. You get a train, number one, the A, and you're really close to your location where you want to do. So it's really easy to get transportation and walkable. I think that Vision Zero has been a failure in many levels. I think we need to use more speed cameras in our district. But not only that, we have the speed cameras, but we have to increase the consequences for speeding in our district. And that's one of the initiatives that I will look for. Because I believe most drivers drive responsible on safety, but there's that little percent that they don't respect. You could put the 35 miles per hour, you could put 25, but they're not going to stop. And we're not doing enough to stop that point. And remember, when it was really easy to lose your license, you were speeding, get the points up. So we need to go back to that. Like, driving irresponsible should not, or reckless in our district or in the city should not be allowed. Also, we need to target it and get some funding for pedestrian education, because the conversation mostly go one way, but we also need to know that it's our life that is a risk. So we have to be careful when we're on the road. We have to be, as pedestrian, really careful. Like I say, like every time I go with my kids to the street, I hold their hands, I work extremely carefully. And there's a lot of changes that we need to do in the district, because Vision Zero in our district hasn't been impacted as big as in the rest of the city, but from the rest of the city, it has slowed down and it hasn't done what it was supposed to do, which was reduce the fatality on pedestrian.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember De La Rosa, go next to you. Same question.
Thank you. I mean, I think that one of the key elements is that city, state, and federal government have to work together. If the city, and I think that this is why Vision Zero hasn't been as successful, if the city tries to implement sweeping changes on its own, it's not going to be long lasting and it's not going to work. For example, in Albany, we've made sure that the speed camera legislation continues to be upheld, right? We continue to to bring it back up and vote for it. On the federal level, we have transportation funding that is coming down into our districts, transportation funding for things like the Greenway that help connectivity, right? So each level of government has to work together in order to make sure that we have the resources we need to change the infrastructure of Upper Manhattan. I would also, at the city council level, I would vote for things like open streets and pedestrian plazas. I think we need to do more of that in Upper Manhattan. That it will also help our small businesses. If we look at plazas as a way of not only making sure that we're reducing car traffic, but also as a way for our small businesses to sell their wares and also to pedestrianize the streets. I also think that we need to invest in clearly designated bike lanes. We have some bike lanes uptown, but they're not protected bike lanes. We need the right type of bike lanes in order to make sure that people who are utilizing those bike lanes feel safe. I feel like sometimes we walk down the street and we're like, no one's using the bike lane, but maybe it's because on that street, it doesn't make sense for a cyclist to actually get on that bike lane because they're putting themselves in danger if they're competing with a truck. So we need to make sure that it's not only putting in infrastructure for infrastructure's sake, but that it's the right type of infrastructure. And finally, as some of the colleagues have already said, we need to slow it down. We need to make sure that we have red light cameras, that we have speed cameras, that we have speed bumps. I've personally talked to the DOT about putting in some speed bumps, and there's a lot of regulations about where speed bumps can go. For example, if there's a busway, you can't put a speed bump on a busway, but you could definitely put the speed bump on the adjacent streets to make sure that as people are going into that main street, they've already slowed down. So those are some of the things I support. I also support the select bus service infrastructure because I think that dedicates a lane for the buses and it creates less rushing and speeding in those streets.
Thank you. Ms. Fernandez.
Hi. So, I mean, I'll be really, really brief. Definitely, it's something that's been, said for many years, and I've mentioned it many times as well. The speed bumps, but having the speed bumps by the pedestrian crossings. That's actually what's proven to actually reduce fatalities in places like Sweden, where Vision Zero actually came from originally in 1995. Secondly, it takes a lot more infrastructure adjustments to do this, but it has been done in the past. Working with federal, state, and city government, we were able to change the Sheridan Expressway into a boulevard, working federal, state, and city. And I was able to do that when I was chief of staff for Congressman Serrano numerous years ago. And it's roundabouts. I know that roundabouts would be, difficult, but I think that we need to start thinking in that way. There are architectural, structural changes that can be made to make the streets safer for us in the long term. And then, of course, the speed limits, the 25 miles per hour is the speed limit. That is the limit in which, if there's human contact, impact, humans will still survive. We have to have more of those speed limits around the city.
Okay, thank you. So for the next question, we'll move on to question 3 and the answer. I'll give you the answering order before I ask the question so you guys know what's up. It'll be Mr. Perez, Assemblymember De La Rosa, Ms. Fernandez, and Ms. Garcia. And it's about dedicated bus lanes. So I'd like to know what you think of the new 181st Street dedicated bus lane. What is it like? Do you like it? Do you not like it? And would you support more lanes like it in the district or elsewhere in the city? Mr. Perez.
The 181st bus lane. I have to see how that works. Because again, the way our district is designed, that's basically the only way to go through the Bronx and Manhattan. And then one of the problems we're having is if you want to open the space, we have to be able to design it in a way that it actually works. Because if you want to open the space on 181st, but then everybody is stuck on the bridge of 181st, then you're actually doing nothing good. You're actually making matters worse. I would like to see if there's any chance to the 181st, a couple of months to see if it works. One of the things that actually didn't happen is like somebody else was mentioning, the outreach to the community and the people that were going to be affected to it for that, especially the taxi drivers. They were not contacted. They were not outreach to them to see what were their opinion. The small business on 181st, they were not there. We already have it. We already have the 181st bike lane, the bus lane. Let's see how it's happening. Let's see how it rolls out. I would definitely love to see a bus lane in Amsterdam Avenue. That's one of the streets that we could have it. And we could dedicate it. And we already have two bus that goes travel there. Maybe they go faster in that area.
Okay, thank you. Assembly member?
I actually gonna respectfully disagree with my colleague Josue here. I think that if you look at what's happening on 181st is where all of the buses meet. The buses that are crossing from the Bronx into Washington Heights, and the place where buses are crossing from the main corridor of Broadway into the southern part of the Heights. And so that's why it makes sense to have a busway there, because that way you're moving the buses out of the most congested corridors and giving them the space to go, and so that people can safely board and onboard. I understand that the taxi industry is one that I support. Many of my family members are actually livery taxi drivers. Many of the people that work in those industries are industries that I think that we need to preserve, because as an immigrant community, right, if we don't have industries like those where our communities have thrived, that's more unemployment and less benefits for the workers, immigrant workers of our community. But we have to have a very clear conversation with that industry to talk to them and engage them in these projects so that they too can see that this is going to lessen some of the congestion that they too are stuck in for many, many hours. So I support the 181st busway. I agree with Josue that we have to see how it plays out, right? Sometimes the way things are designed and what actually happens in real life are two different things. So let's look at it. But I wouldn't just from jump say that I don't support it. I want it to be successful because I think it's going to provide safety.
Okay. Ms. Fernandez?
So I live only a few blocks away. I live on 183rd Street, and so it's 181st Street, and it's an area that I go to every day. And so I think it's critically important to have buses be able to travel quickly, especially a lot of the people on the buses are working class folks trying to get to and from work, and it reduces their time commute by 20 minutes. But again, I think the implementation was flawed. We have this bus lane implemented at exactly the same time that the #1 train at St. Nicholas Avenue being closed due to construction. I have spoken to the business owners, and their commerce has decreased by 50%. They're trying to come back after the pandemic. So, and the final piece is that the taxi drivers are petrified. They understand that they can go in and then make an immediate right if they're picking up or dropping people off, but they're concerned that they're going to get ticketed, even if they are only going in for 1 block. So they're losing as well. And so I think, again, to my point earlier, in addition to speaking to people one-on-one and getting all the stakeholders, it's around the details of the implementation. And what I would recommend is actually doing the bus lanes, having the road only for bus lanes, but at set hours in the morning during rush hour from 6 to 9 or 6 to 10, and then again, evening rush hour. 5 to 7, and that even during that period, the only other automobile that gets automobile that gets a waiver would be the taxi drivers. No other cars during those times, and then I understand that trucks can go on as during the time. But I think the implementation should have been something that was a little bit more scaled. So that it could actually be successful. Right now, it's a ghost town. You walk down 181st Street, there aren't people walking there and shopping like there was a few weeks ago. And I can tell you that because I've been going there every single day.
Thank you. Ms. Garcia?
Thank you. I live 1 block south of 181st Street. And I think the bus lane is actually an excellent idea. You actually are encouraging more people to use busing as an alternative. And when you think of 181st Street as a corridor that connects the neighborhoods, and it's very, I mean, these neighborhoods and the populations are very closely connected in terms of between the Bronx and Washington Heights, it just makes perfect sense that this bustling is there in terms of easing traffic, congestion, and as a form of transportation. I have to say also that as a mother, it does make me feel safer. If you think of where it is, that lane, that street is between like two or three blocks north of the George Washington Bridge. You have the Henry Hudson Parkway, you have the Cross Bronx. And what we often see is cars getting off the highway to use it as a shortcut or something to get to the Cross Bronx. And you just kind of have a kind of chaos that just doesn't feel safe and just adds to congestion. So I think we need more of it. I do agree always. You can fine tune that conversation. I believe currently there is what we call a CAB, a community advisory board. And they're open to adding more voices on that CAB to hear how they can fine tune, they being the DOT, these decisions that are making. And I believe, I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that someone representing the Washington Heights Business Improvement District sits on it to inform how this is impacting businesses. But I agree, conversations should continue to be ongoing to make it better.
Okay, thank you guys. So the next question is about generally whether or not you support the idea of repurposing street space for other purposes. I'm going to touch on Transportation Alternatives 25 by 25 initiative, which is their goal is to repurpose 25% of the street space in New York for better use by 2025. If you do support that, say so. If you don't, I would like to know if you agree with that goal generally, not necessarily those numbers, but the move towards changing street space into other uses besides vehicular traffic. So I'm going to start with Assemblymember De La Rosa on this, then we'll go to Ms. Fernandez, Ms. Garcia, and Mr. Perez. Okay.
Yep, I absolutely support the idea of using our streets for other purposes. I talked a little bit earlier about open streets. I support open streets. I talked a little bit about markets and pedestrian plazas. I think that if one thing this pandemic has shown us is that our outdoor space is a jewel and a treasure that we have to continue to utilize and program and keep safe for people to enjoy, because we don't have a backyard. We don't have an ability to get fresh air if we're not walking down the street in our communities. We have our parks and we have our streets. And so I think that I would wholeheartedly support that. Love to learn more about what the plan would entail, but I overarching ideas, truly support using our streets for alternative uses.
Okay, Ms. Fernandez?
Yes, I think that, we have some great examples of some streets that have been converted as peatonal streets where especially restaurants are able to enjoy having outdoor seating. Specifically, Dykeman by Seaman has been quite successful. And so I would agree with that concept.
Okay. Ms. Garcia?
Yes, when you think back to even organizations like the Police Athletic League, PAL, and other community-based organizations, they use the streets for a playground for our kids. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to people, families, seniors, everyone, just feeling safe, like the streets are ours. So I definitely agree with moving towards creating spaces like for that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perez, same question to you.
Definitely. And I really think we have to create something smart. When it's increased depends on the season. In the summer, we have more, and we have dedicated, people already know about it. One of the issues I have, for example, we do a lot of fairs and street fairs in Washington Heights and England. I love them, but a lot of people don't even get to know them before there is, but we have a schedule ahead of time people know it and we have a use it every year, then that would be definitely great, especially towards the summer. And going back to the last question of the 181st corridor, believe me, we all live close by 181st. I live in Amsterdam. I live at 2 minutes away. I passed by today 3 times, okay? I take the 3 buses to go to work. And the whole goal for this is to make the time, to reduce the time. And if I take the bus through using the 3-way, it takes me literally 1 hour and 20 minutes to get to my job. Now I have to walk to the 1, then take the 12, and it literally takes me like 45 minutes or 40 minutes, but I don't use that bus lane anymore because at 2 p.m. it's already packed. I would agree with the bus lane, maybe removing the parking, and that's a conversation which you have. Remove the parking, not the traffic. And for example, something that nobody talks about it, we have to relocate the fire department parking station. The fire department usually park and double park, and that's usually cause huge delay for the bus lane. Again, if the goal is to reduce traffic time, then it's not working because there's no alternative to go around. And that's what's happening in the 181st.
Okay, I'm going to follow up with a question for you, Mr. Perez, and then I'll go to each of the candidates as well on that, which is, there will be certainly times when a constituent will call your office if you're elected to say, okay, you want to put open streets or you want to do a street fair in the street, you want to use parking spaces to do something else, but I want more parking spaces. I want to keep things easy for me to drive and I want to keep parking spaces and please don't do that. How would you handle that situation and speak to that person who does not want to see those things change on the street?
Right. What definitely have to see is like, it's not a one individual choices. It have to be what the input of the community overall is and consensus. And also we have the losing of the parking spaces will not be permanent. We'll be being a daily maybe on a daily basis, maybe on the weekend. So why would they have a street fair? So I understand their consensus, but also we have to find alternative for those constituents. And we have to make sure that we have to work on trying to get parking spaces. Of course, I want the number of the cars reduced on the city. I definitely wanted to see, but there's people that depends on cars and they have to have it. We all should have like so limited parking spaces, but private parking or public parking in Washington High, that we had to start thinking about how to build municipal parking for everyone.
Okay, Ms. Fernandez, this same question follow up to you. How would you handle a conversation where someone said, don't get rid of my parking for XYZ, new improvement to the streetscape?
So, I mean, hopefully by the time that person comes and speaks to me, our office has already developed a relationship and has already developed a relationship of trust. And so, based on that, it would depend on what it is. But if something that, I don't know if I've heard the first part of the question, it was a temporary, is that what you were off? If it was a temporary?
No, I was actually speaking about a permanent change, something that would, change the streetscape in a permanent way that it may remove parking or change the way that traffic moves.
So as I mentioned earlier in this forum, we have to have a constituent services office that is informing the community of what is coming down the pipe. As soon as we start getting an inkling of it, so that we can start educating folks and speaking to folks and also getting feedback. So at that point, the goal would be that we've already spoken to folks that would be resistant to it, and the conversation would be different, so that we don't have to have the kinds of conversations that are happening now, where people really are very much resistant and up in arms. And I noticed in a couple of the chats, questions which are very valid, saying that in the case of 181st, the business owners were spoken to, but I don't think it was then in a meaningful way, because this is how they're responding. So
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, Ms. Garcia, same follow-up to you. How do you approach a situation where folks are pushing back on something you'd want to see change on the streetscape, hypothetically?
Yeah, it's a hypothetical question, but in our office, we get a lot of those questions under different topics. One of the first things that I would say is join the conversation, because once there is an idea that's going to impact the way people feel in their neighborhood, or that if they feel that their quality of life is going to be impacted, whatever it is, changes in services, we have to provide a space for conversations, and not seem like-minded, but people that just come from different points of view on that issue. So I would connect them to where there's already a conversation happening. If it doesn't exist, then usually what our office has done in the past is that we create that space, and then we kind of pass it off to the community, just leading those conversations on their own. I think what we also have to realize is that we have seen in this pandemic that we actually are resilient. When you look at supporting our businesses, since we have been talking about small businesses, like there's, as we've been talking about small businesses in a way as if there's tension between expanding in terms of safety for our pedestrians, but our businesses. And I think actually those things don't have to exist in a very tense way. We've seen in this pandemic that because we were supporting our small businesses, we did lose parking spots because the city allowed them to build structures so that we can all be safe. Right? So we were joined by the idea of safety, and we wanted to be safe. So businesses were then allowed to create the structures, and that doesn't mean less space. And so I think having those kind of conversations about what joins us in these conversations, we all want space, we all want to improve quality of life, and just continue to have the conversation towards solutions is how I would approach that.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember De La Rosa, same question to you. What's your approach to a situation?
Well, thank you for the question. I actually had that conversation with someone today, and they were talking about the city bike docks that took up some spaces in the community. And I pointed to them to their city council member, and I said, you should reach out to your city council member and explain to them what your concern is. I think as a city council member, my approach is always to listen. Right? People need to feel validated in their opinions, in their feelings, and I would listen. But after I listen, I would explain to them, number one, what the outreach process was. And I'm going to agree with the colleagues across the board that outreach needs to be done in a more targeted and focused way. I'll explain to them what the bigger picture planning for the community is and where they can get involved in that planning process. And then I would say to them, these infrastructure changes are happening because we're addressing this problem. And I would explain that clearly to members of the community so that they understand and they can really have the logic behind why the planning is happening. And I find that most of the time when you take the time to have those conversations with folks, they may still disagree with the loss of parking, because if they're drivers and they, rely on their car or think they rely on their car to get to and from point A to point B, they're going to say, well, parking is the most important thing. It's the priority. But when you take the time to explain it to them, at least they know where you're coming from and why the change is happening. And I find oftentimes that kind of breaks the tension. And so I will continue to do that. I think that as city council members, we will have the opportunity to transform our community boards and our community board process. We're going to get a new borough president as well. And so these are opportunity points for us as the incoming class of the city council to actually shape the way that conversations are happening in our communities. And I think that we have to continue to focus people around the conversations of planning that are happening.
Okay, thank you. We are running up against time now. So we're going to wrap up with quick closing statements from each of you about pitching yourself as the best person to, have some really good ideas around transit in the district. So we'll speak first with Ms. Fernandez, go to Ms. Garcia, Mr. Perez, and Assemblymember to close us out.
Thank you so much. So we need a city council member that sweats the details. That is what I've done in every position that I've been in. And by sweating the details, especially when it comes to policies, we ensure that we do not have inadvertent, unintended consequences, which is actually quite common, unfortunately, in policies. That is why, for example, we were able to pass sanctuary laws that actually then became the model for the entire country. When we heard from our clients that we served from the organization I ran for 10 years, that they could not find employers that would treat them with respect and pay them well, we created a worker center. And in that worker center, we made sure to vet the employers. And I'm sharing that as an example that I already have a proven track record of listening to those that are most in need, that are most marginalized, and then coming up with solutions. That worker center was replicated across the city and then became a $10 million initiative for other worker centers across the city. So it's just one example of many, many things that I've done. I would apply the same for transportation alternatives. I would apply the same for safe streets. I would apply the same for things that not only will make us safe, but will also make us environmentally healthy. But I will do this hand in hand with the community so that it actually has long-lasting buy-in. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Garcia.
Hi. You know, I've been in a lot of conversations with people that don't agree with me. But I always am able to corral and get consensus so that we can move the needle towards change. There are so many different opinions about what it means to be safe in regards to transportation, cyclists, and pedestrians. I've been able to bring people together and make change. One of those things was, you know, when I had to face a senator that was actually having an alliance with the Republicans. That was uncomfortable because it was very local, but it was fine because we knew that the end goal was actually better policies and better quality of life for us here. I am someone who has the experience not only in the city council as chief of staff, but I was the executive director of the Black, Latino, Asian Caucus. That's 27 council members who were my bosses with differing agendas. But we were able to do the first ever job forum, really targeting Black and Latinx and immigrant communities. There's a lot for this community to do, and I have proven, my record has proven, as someone who was born and raised here, raising her 3 children here, that I don't only listen, but I listen effectively and I make it and turn it into action. And as your city council member, I believe that the best architect for our city is our community. That means you and I. We are the ones who are experts on the policies that will impact and how to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perez?
Again, Josue Perez, I'm a teacher for over 20 years, and a lot of people have done great things, but remember that I'm doing the work that I have done as a community organizer, as a community member. I worked first as a supermarket in 170 on Broadway, and then I worked the ladder up, also working in the supermarket, working in a restaurant, and at the same time going to college. So I know what it's like for this community. In terms of trying to get solutions as a city council, we all have this opportunity. Even if we're not even in city council as a assembly or as working for the senator, which have come to the city council and demand the changes that we need in the city council. I already have spoken with several members in the community, especially in Washington Heights, over hundreds and thousands of them. I already have a specific plans and idea of how to improve transportation, how to make it green spaces. A lot of the green spaces and a lot of the greens is not happening in underdeveloped community like ours. We don't get the funding that we need. So we gotta make sure, for example, we live out of the soccer initiative, we're left out of it. So we got to bring more green spaces. We had to make sure we had to create the plan, but we had to talk to the community and we had to design a plan that made perfect sense. We love New York City, we're here to stay. This is the city that keep moving and never sleep.
Thank you. Assembly member.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. You know, these issues are personal to us because we love our community, because we've chosen this community, because this community is a resilient one. But the issues that we're discussing here today are issues that are a matter of life and death. Our failure to deliver safe streets will cause people to die. And so as council members, we have to take that responsibility on our shoulders because it is a true responsibility for the future of our communities. As your assembly member, I have delivered and I have pulled the levers of government in favor of our community every single time. And I want to continue to do that hand in hand with you as we transform our city into one that can, overcome a pandemic, that can bring our communities back in place and can make us safer than we ever were. Because it's enough of having a community that has been historically left behind by government. When the people speak, government's job is to listen and to make sure that we're having the tough questions and not putting in danger the lives of our neighbors. And so I'm looking forward to bringing that energy to City Hall in 2022 so that our community can finally be on the map. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of the forum. Thank you all for your really candid and thoughtful answers. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Transportation Alternatives for making this happen. And have a great evening. Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thank you for putting this together. Was it great?
Thank you.
Thank you.